The whole climate scare is based on them forgetting at a vital point in their calculations that the sun is shining. They had forgotten to allow for the fact that the sun is shining. You see, what you get if you put greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and if the atmosphere is not in thermodynamic equilibrium, if it is not an ideal gas, then you can get, as a result of the greenhouse effect, some warming. But the direct warming, even if there were a thermodynamic disequilibrium such as would allow for any warming to occur, is small. Their estimates of that are about 1 Celsius degree for every doubling of the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. Now, we've only increased it by 40% since way back in 1850. So a doubling is going to take a lot longer. So you only get 1 Celsius degree of warming for every doubling of the CO2 concentration. That's what's called the direct or reference sensitivity, it's called. But then what they say is that if there is not only a thermodynamic disequilibrium but a radiative imbalance in the atmosphere, then you will also get temperature feedback response, which means that, for instance, if the atmosphere is warmed up by adding more CO2 to it, then the space occupied by the atmosphere is capable of carrying near exponentially more water vapor as it warms. And that extra water vapor is a greenhouse gas, so it causes additional warming in addition to the original warming, and that is known as a feedback response. And we say that they have made the mistake of not realizing that the fact that the sun is shining causes a large feedback response, which they have mistakenly attributed to the pre-industrial naturally occurring greenhouse gases. Then they've said because they think the greenhouse gas warming is tripled by the feedbacks, most of which actually come from the sun, therefore any future warming caused by us will also be tripled. And so from 1 Celsius of warming per doubling of CO2, they make it 3.5. And so turning it from 1 to 3.5 turns it from a non-problem to a possible rather small problem, which they try to make into a big problem. But actually, it's only 1 Celsius, if that. Because 2 eminent scientists here in Ireland, whom I met yesterday and I was discussing their results with them, have discovered that the atmosphere, right from down here all the way up to the stratosphere, is in thermodynamic equilibrium. And a paper written by Albert Einstein 100 years ago this year, in 1919, demonstrated that if you have a gas such as the atmosphere, which is an ideal gas, in other words, it's in what's called thermodynamic equilibrium, then the greenhouse effect, though it is still present and can be detected from satellites, does not and cannot cause any warming whatsoever. So not only is there no feedback response in the climate as a result of our activities, but there is no direct warming from the CO2 either, if they are right. So their result confirms ours, that the feedback response is negligible, and that therefore you're looking at 1 Celsius of warming and not 3. But they go one step further by saying that because there is a thermodynamic equilibrium, which they have demonstrated by looking at 20 million sets of 1,000 records, 20,000 million individual measurements over the last 80 years, taken by balloon-mounted radiosondes going up through every level of the atmosphere and taking measurements of temperature and pressure and humidity and wind direction as they go. They've analysed all of those. It's taken them 5 years. And they have now proven, and it's the most elegant proof I have ever seen, it's the most beautiful thing I've seen in the whole of climate science, is this result of theirs. And there is no doubt about their result. I mean, it is obviously true. They rewrote the ideal gas equation to express it in terms of density against pressure divided by temperature, molar density. And the moment you compare the molar density with the pressure, you get this extraordinary straight line. Suddenly all the jiggly lines you get, because the atmosphere looks like an untidy place, it suddenly becomes a straight line to a confidence of 0.9997. I've never seen anything like it. That's the R squared, as it's called. The confidence is enormous in this. Now, this may all sound like gobbledygook, but I hope you can see from my excitement at what they revealed to me yesterday. I give their names. It's Michael Connolly and his son Rownan.
Okay.
And they are two of the finest minds it's been my pleasure to meet. When you meet them, they sound as if they'd just come out of the nearest bog.
Right.
And they're based in Dublin. And they came here.
Shut down, obviously.
Well, they very interestingly, they were invited to give a talk at a university, I won't say which and I won't say where, not many weeks ago. It was all lined up. And then this is what happened. The left, against the communist left, they found out that the two Connollys were going to present their results. They know the Connollys are right. They know that if those results get reported at universities, it's all over bar the shouting.
Yes.
That's it. It confirms our theoretical result. But their result, let's be very clear, is much more elegant than ours. Ours is very simple. It's very difficult to refute our result. It's true. It's a much simpler way of getting to the truth than what they've done. But what they've done is a much more beautiful, much more comprehensive. And their method is empirical. In other words, it's by measurement, whereas ours is theoretical by playing with the equations. Now, both methods are valid in science, but the empirical method always comes first. And the amount of work that these two lads have put into this is quite astonishing. So remember those names, Michael and Rownan Connolly, because I'm going to try to get them. I'm going to try to get them the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
For physics.
I mean, they're not even known over here, of course.
Well, of course not, because the Mark Stream media, as I call them, will not report anything that doesn't fit the Communist Party line.
No.
And this is a great tragedy because there's an enormous amount of wonderful science going on, but I assure you, I've never seen anything as beautiful as the result. And when Michael told me how he'd found it, he said he went in to see Rownan, because they have separate rooms in the place where they do their research, the lab, and he said, "Have you seen this?" And Rownan was astonished. He said, "You must have made a mistake." So they then began checking random records from this huge set of 20 million records. Yes. And they found every single one showed this astonishing straight line comes out.
They'd be murdered.
All the way up the atmosphere, up to the tropopause, and then you get a different straight line from there. And very occasionally in the Arctic in the winter you get a different straight line at what's called the boundary layer, which is the 2 miles nearest the surface. Otherwise it's a straight line all the way through the troposphere. It's absolutely beautiful. And this is... It's such a beautifully simple idea to take the ideal gas equation, which you can look up in any textbook, and then just rearrange its terms to express it in terms of molar density against pressure divided by temperature. And bingo, this straight line comes out. And then they calculated what's called the R squared, which is the degree of confidence. The degree of confidence that result is correct is what's called the R squared. It's just a way of measuring the statistical confidence that they're right. And it's an independent, formal way of checking whether the result you have found is likely to be a correct result or just a result of a mistake.
Right.
And if you get a statistical confidence level of very close to 1 means it's definitely caused by what they have found. And their result is 0.9997, which is very, very, very close to 1. It doesn't get better than that.
We'll let people try and absorb. But
now, the reason I explain that is because, therefore, they have carried out the standard statistical method of checking whether what they have found is likely to be right, and they have found that it is likely to be right. And the result that they have found is what is called in science replicable, and that means that any other scientist can go and get the same data, which are publicly available. They can then perform the same tests, do the same rewriting of the equation, and check the same data, and they will get the same answer. And what that means is it is not like so much of climate science, like the hockey stick graph, or the hokey stick graph as I call it, where Michael Mann of Penn State University had produced a graph that just didn't look right. And when he was asked to produce the material that he'd calculated it from so that it could be recalculated to check whether it was correct, he was unable or unwilling to produce it. When he did eventually produce something, it was a jumbled mess, and it was clearly not replicable. And therefore that result, for that reason alone, would have been valueless. But what the Connollys have done, everything is meticulously recorded, the records are kept, every step of the calculation is demonstrated. It is a beautiful piece of proper, old-fashioned scientific research. It blows it out of the water because, just to put it very simply, if the atmosphere is as they have proven that it is, from the only set of records from which this could be proved, nobody else had examined it. They have proven that the atmosphere is in thermodynamic equilibrium, then the greenhouse effect itself cannot cause any global warming. It's still a greenhouse effect, but it cannot cause warming. And Einstein's paper of 1919 provided the proof that that is the case. So,
but it is the case that there hasn't been any warming for 20 years.
Well, no, that's not quite right.
No,
there has been some warming, and the question then is why. So I said to them, oh yeah, this is all very well, you're pretending the greenhouse effect doesn't cause warming, but...
Didn't the Met Office publish a report which was in the Daily Mail saying that warming hasn't happened? This was a few years ago.
Let me explain. Well, let's first of all stick to this result that they have found, because it's so very important. They said, right, if greenhouse gases are incapable of producing warming because the atmosphere is in thermodynamic equilibrium, and that means, according to Einstein, that the greenhouse effect cannot cause warming. It's still a greenhouse effect, but it can't cause warming. I had to say to Michael Connolly, I said, don't say there isn't a greenhouse effect, there is, but the greenhouse effect does not cause warming in an atmosphere in thermodynamic equilibrium, in an ideal gas. It can't do it. That's their contention. And if they are right about that, then it's game over, because not only is there no feedback, and that is established by the fact that there's no radiative imbalance in the atmosphere if there's a thermodynamic equilibrium, but likewise it demonstrates that there's not even the direct warming before feedback from the CO2 itself, because there can't be. So this is why this result is why I've taken a bit of time to explain it. And if you're finding this difficult, just try to follow the excitement of a scientist like me. And of course, I don't have any piece of paper to say I'm a scientist. I'm a layman, really, but I'm interested in science.
Your background is in politics. Your former Conservative peer. Well, you're still obviously...
Well, I never had a seat in the House, because, of course, they abolished that long before my father died. But so I've never had a seat in the House. But I used to work for Margaret Thatcher, so I was a Conservative. I am a Catholic, but I'm also a scientific researcher.
UKIP.
And I have and I have a team.
Just for people who don't know.
Yes, and I have a team of scientists who work with me. And so, but this result that the Connollys have found, this, once it's checked out by others, once they have published it, and I've said they've got to publish it in a proper peer-reviewed journal,
well, who will
then that's the big problem, because when they tried to go and speak at a university recently, they were disinvited the week before. They were due to go. They'd prepared everything. They'd got all their equipment for the experiments they were going to do in front of the students and so forth. And they were told, no, you can't come, because the left have threatened violence if you do. That's how scientific debate now happens at universities. If you take a line that the communist left don't like, they go to the Vice-Chancellor and to the Dean of your faculty and they threaten violence. Then the Vice-Chancellor and Dean of the faculty, often good communists themselves, say, ah yes, we've got the message, leave it to us. And then what they did is they wrote to the Connollys and they said, if you want to come to our university, at our invitation, let it be said, it was at the university's invitation.
Can you name the university?
No, I've told you I can't. Then we will require you to take out insurance against the violence that our fellow communists have threatened. So then the Connollys caught them by surprise by getting that insurance, because they had a financial backer who was willing to pay the considerable cost, because once you had a threat of violence like that, the insurers are going to say, well, we're going to need quite a large premium to cover that one. So, but they found that premium and they paid it. So then they said, right, we've done that, here's the certificate. So then the university waited until a Friday night, when of course all businesses have gone home. Then, and they were due to talk on the Monday morning, on the Friday night they said, but you haven't also got personal insurance, which they hadn't asked for originally. So
what
they were
was
then...
the difference between the insurance that they were getting and...
The public liability and personal insurance are two different things. So they were then told, oh, but because you haven't got personal insurance, we're not going to let you on campus. So it was a complete setup, but in such a way that the left could say among themselves, of course, we didn't actually deny them their right of free speech. We just said we couldn't responsibly let them on campus because they didn't have the right insurance. And somehow they should have known that this was a university that was not prepared to provide that cover itself, even though it had invited them. That's the territory we're in here.
Yes, of course.
So it's very important to understand both the importance of the Connolly's result and the beauty of it, on the one hand, and the shocking reaction to that result on the part of the communist left in the academic community, which is absolutely terrified of what they've done, is determined to stop them getting any kind of a platform, whether in the secular press or in the learned journals or in any university. Not because the communists know they are wrong, but because the communists know they are right. That is what's so wicked about this.
That is the thing.
It is an outright,
if they were wrong,
deliberate,
they'd let them.
Calculated denial of the right of academic research and inquiry and publication and speech and action.
But it's a lot more than that. I mean, think of all the children tonight who are going to sleep having nightmares because they're being told in school every day, sorry, but the planet is about to implode. By this Greta Thunberg or whatever she's called.
And what does she know about anything?
Well,
very interestingly, when I wrote 6 months ago, let me speak, 6 months ago,
it's going to be fine.
6 months ago, I wrote to our Environment Secretary and I said, right, here is our paper, here is our result. It demonstrates, I'll start this bit again, so we don't get lost. So I wrote to the Environment Secretary then, he was called Michael Gove. I said, here is our result. He was the Environment Secretary. It was his job to deal with climate change, among other things. So we sent him our paper and said, here's a 2-page summary of it, here's the full paper so you can get your analysts to check it, etc. But it shows that this has been hugely exaggerated. If you cancel out the error they've made and you correct for that, there isn't a climate problem. It just doesn't exist. There will not be enough warming on any view to be worth worrying about, and it'll be far too slow, so we'll all have plenty of time to adapt to it, and warming of a small amount over a slow period is better than cold weather anyway, worldwide. So we didn't get a reply for 6 weeks. Eventually we got a reply saying the Environment Secretary has nothing to do with the environment, nothing to do with climate change. You must refer this to a different ministry. The very next day, the Environment Secretary saw Greta Thunberg. So he was willing to hear the side of the story that he wanted to hear from an autistic schoolchild who hadn't the faintest idea what she was talking about, but has been relentlessly propagandized by communist teachers. But he was not willing to hear a former member of his own party who leads a team of eminent scientists who had done a serious job of work over the last 3 or 4 years, had come to the conclusion that the whole thing's nonsense. So that's what we're dealing with, and this is supposedly
what is driving it all? Communism.
This is supposedly the Conservative Party that Michael Gove is supposed to be a minister in, and he's now been moved to a different ministry.
But is there any convincing them?
But well, this is supposed to be the Conservative Party, and what is extraordinary about all this is the utter intellectual bankruptcy of the centre-right when confronted with communism. They simply say, oh, you can't use words like communist, even though they are communist, and the people are quite open about being communist. The 3 or 4 people who are behind this, who are communists, are open about the fact that they are communists and that their real aim is to destroy the West. They say this. I actually got into the website of one of these communists, and he said, yes, of course we're extreme left-wingers. We hate capitalism. We are using the climate change meme as a way of destroying capitalism and making everybody in the capitalist West poor. That was their aim. It's their declared aim. And if you put this evidence in the front of the so-called Conservative Party in Britain, which is supposed to be a centre-right party, it's supposed to fight this kind of totalitarian nonsense, what do? They go and listen to a 16-year-old school kid having taken 6 weeks not to read a scientific paper or even a 2-page summary of it in plain English, which says, look, mate, there is not a climate problem, and we have proven it. So when you're dealing with intellectual bankruptcy of that order, that's why I'm no longer a conservative, because these people are thick as two short planks, and that's doing a disservice to the short planks.
They're controlled and they're brainwashed.
They're just stupid.
But they can't.
They are as thick as two short. I mean, Michael Gove, he makes a very fine speech, but he couldn't add 2 and 2 if he tried. These people are immensely dense, particularly when it comes to anything scientific. They really are stupid. And that's why if you go to the Brexit Party, for instance, where I'm giving a presentation on this on September the 22nd, I will be saying to them, these are the results that we have found. These are the results the Connollys have found. The two results match. There is a coherence between two completely different approaches. Ours theoretical, theirs empirical.
Yeah.
That makes this very powerful and very difficult to refute. On the basis of these results, you can put it in the bank that global warming isn't a problem. And the Brexit Party will understand that. And they will say, right, we will get our people to look at this. We'll refer this to scientists on both sides. We will check it out. And if we find you're right, our policy will be to say we'll have nothing further to do with this global warming rubbish. Now that's the difference between the Brexit Party, which is Nigel Farage's party on the one hand, and the Conservative Party, which is dead from the neck up and dead from the neck down, intellectually speaking. It really is. You know, there are 1 or 2 people in there who've got a brain, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's local to us, we see him often. But, you know, these numpties in the Environment Department, they haven't a clue what they're doing. So we're dealing with a level of intellectual inadequacy throughout the West. It's the same in academia. You know, the academics should have discovered what it was left to me as a layman to discover. They should have discovered what it was left to 2 people from outside climate science, the Connollys, to come in and learn climate science and then discover. But they didn't, because they didn't want the truth. They wanted the party line.
Yes.
And the difference between us and them is that we take no particular political sides in this. We want the scientific truth. And with respect, we think we have found it.